Hey folks, welcome back to Shadowlands. So I reached level 60 on my Marksmanship Hunter. So I wanted to go over a little bit of the talents and the rotation. Since I switched from more of a PvP setup to focusing more on damage and abilities and making as best use of the abilities as possible. Marksmanship has some um, interesting / different ways the abilities work together with some of the passive abilities. Um, I leveled doing dungeons for the most part. I did a couple world quests for trinkets. Um, don't know that it's really worth doing for much else than that. Trinkets, rings, neck piece, weapons, everything else kind of more commonly drops. So, um, did fine in the world quest I did. Did alright in most of the dungeons. Kind of used them as a testing ground when I was shifting talents and things around. So, I have mostly done sandbox things, at least in more recent expansions. I did Argus in Legion to unlock Void Elf, and I did Mechagon in Battle for Azeroth just to get the uh, the mech Mechano cat and the colors and things like that. I got Rust. Let me see here. Yeah, there we go. Junk Heap Drifter from Rust Feather. I got the Spider. So, yeah. So that's usually what I've done is some, at least in PvE, is just like the sandbox type of stuff. So, looking for or looking to reclaim or have the nostalgia of Timeless Isle again. So if we look through the spellbook, there's not too much that's changed other than just overall hunter changes. I did pick Necrolords as the Covenant. That's where I am now. Just because their ability seemed like the most fun to play around with. Everything else was kind of either target on location or just seemed like it was kind of made for like a pre-build or something, and I just didn't want to go through all that. I think my second choice was Night Fae, and since my monk is already a Night Fae and I've already done all that, I kind of didn't want to go through it again. So I really haven't done anything with Necrolords yet. I have other characters that are Necrolords, I just haven't done much with them. So this kind of sort of works at this point, I would say. I partially forgot to use it, and when I did use it, it wasn't an overwhelming effect. So don't count the Covenant ability too much in this when it comes to DPS. I also played around quite a bit with haste, so I'll go over that at different points. That is probably my biggest complaint, or my only complaint if I had to pick one thing, is for whatever reason, um, this is what everything looks like at max level with the best gear I have equipped. And for some reason, my haste has been incredibly low. When I started leveling, it was at 8%. Um, and depending on which talents I had, I could get it up to about 15%, and even that seemed a bit slow. It was better, but it was a little slow. Haste does increase focus regeneration. So focus is the opposite of energy, where energy refills quickly. Focus refills slowly. So that is going to be something I'm going to work on. That's going to be my main priority, I think, is getting haste at least up to at least 10%, and then kind of go from there, kind of relook at things, because I think there's some different talent choices you could make depending on what your haste is. Everything else I think has mostly been fine. Critical strike and mastery have varied as stats do when you change your gear. Versatility, I don't know that it's really made much of a difference one way or the other. I haven't really worried about it too much. I did okay in most of the dungeons I was in. There were a few. What I tended to find was groups where we were all roughly the same level. I did better. I was first or second in DPS usually. Groups where there was maybe one level 60 or so, I was maybe third, maybe fourth in a few where I was, again, kind of playing with some talents and trying to figure out exactly how everything was going to work with that setup. So it wasn't exactly running through a rotation. So yeah, and I also did have, I think it's worth mentioning, was it this one? Yeah. I also did have this trinket equipped for most of the time. This was one that I went out and did a world quest for. So I don't know how often this procced. Again, didn't do a great deal of damage, so still feels like it's worth mentioning. And then my other trinket actually heals me, so it actually has no damage effect per se at all. So yeah, so if we look at actual marksmanship abilities, other than the addition of rapid fire, which was something they added during Battle for Azeroth, this works in a way that when I have used it, I have mixed feelings, because it seems like it should be really good, and it always seems a bit lackluster every time I've used it. I have a talent right now that increases the damage, I think. No, I think I swapped out of that. Yeah, it just, you'd think it would work better than it does. And I think saying it's lackluster it fits it appropriately for describing how it works. Trick shots was something that took me a little bit of playing to really get the hang of using. You don't have much in the way of AoE. You have multi-shot. Multi-shots, generally speaking, in the last few expansions is not been very good. As with most AoE abilities, it does lower damage. So it's not as though you can just spam multi-shot and reach to the top of the DPS meter. You kind of have to do a couple different things. So what Trick Shots does is when multi-shot hits 3 or more targets, your next aim shot or rapid fire will ricochet up to 5 additional targets for 55% of normal damage, which is not terrible. Again, you may or may not. I think part of my issue at times was my gear. You may or may not reach the top of the DPS meter. Kind of depends on your targets, first of all, and your, as I said, your gear. If you are up against a lot of elite, a lot of tougher targets, this may or may not do a lot. As I said, I did mostly dungeons, so I had a lot of trash to play around with that on. If we look at the talents, so as I said, I switched from more of a PvP setup to more of something that was focused on damage, not necessarily optimal damage setup. It's something that focused more on damage. So I had Murder of Crows, which I really like. This is probably one of my favorite abilities in the game overall. However, not great if you're trying to focus on damage and more PvE content. It resets if the target dies with this on it. However, that's just, if it had some kind of a cleave effect, it would be better. Maybe overpowered for PvP, it would be better in PvE. Serpent Sting, I've played around with quite a bit. Again, it's just kind of a lackluster ability. Use this a lot as survival. So it just wasn't an appealing choice. Master Marksman puts a bleed. Now, the bleed is based on the ability that you use. Your range special attack. So from what I can tell, it's mainly just aim shot. Aim shot and range special attack, critical strike, bleed. Of the damage dealt over 6 seconds. So it doesn't do a lot, but it does do something. So of the 3, this was more of an appealing choice. Sadly, I was hoping it would do more AoE damage. Multi-shot doesn't trigger it. It kind of gets triggered with aim shot or rapid fire through ricochet. But it primarily just works on one target. I think I've had it maybe on 2, maybe 3 at one time. And that's kind of changing targets, because since rapid fire is channeled, you don't want to use it on a target that's low health. So I will, if Trick Shots is up, I will target another mob that has more health before I use it. So that was one of the things I realized fairly early on. So if you can get it to work in that way, where you're shifting targets to make benefit of trick shots and different abilities, you can get more of a use out of it. It's disappointing that only one ability actually triggers it. You would think since it says, your special range attack, because I came here and tried it on the target dummy, um, you would think if you had ricochet up that aim shot would apply um, the bleed to all targets it hits, but that, from what I can tell, doesn't seem to be the case. Um, so, yeah, it's really kind of personal preference between Serpent Sting and Master Marksman. I believe, I know there was another Serpent Sting in the game. I'm not entirely sure it did the same thing. That was maybe a little before my time. I remember the nature ability um, that applied a dot. I don't know that I remember using Serpent Sting in its original form. So, yeah, Marksmanship was more of the appealing choice for me in this, since I wanted to get away from Murder of Crows. Um, I had Careful Aim, which aim shot deals 50% damage to targets who are above 70% health. Wanted more AoE. I tried Barrage. Barrage works like Barrage does. This was not helpful in dungeons, as you might imagine, and I should have known that, in all fairness. The one and only time that I know this was really useful was when you had a farm or a barn, I think it was, in Warlords. You could farm, you'd have to go out and kill animals to farm the fur and meat and all these different things you needed in the game, which was actually quite fun. A lot of people did it, and a lot of hunters would use Barrage just to make the process go a little quicker, because it didn't matter what level it was, as long as it came from certain beasts. You could then take it to your barn, and it would, put in a work order, and after so long, it would be whatever it was you wanted. So, since I did a lot with tailoring back then, and I think I even made some, I think it was like the first or second expansion where they did the like the banquet meals for your party. I think I made some of those. So, didn't play a hunter in Warlords. I know this was kind of a widely known thing, though, that hunters would take Barrage, and you'd go out in Shadow Moon Valley from where your garrison was, and you'd see hunters out there using Barrage all the time. So it's kind of for me, in that respect, it's kind of a bit of a novelty ability of somewhat happier times in the game. I actually really enjoyed going out and doing that for the most part. So, went with Explosive Shot instead, which seemed to work perfectly fine. My DPS and my damage increased quite a bit. I did forget in some cases to use this, so I can't say 100% how it will work. Earlier on, I was trying to manage my focus. I'm not used to running out of focus. A side effect of the level squish and the stats squish and all that. I didn't play Hunter much in Battle for Azeroth outside of Mechagon, so the stats squish that we got in BFA, I'm not really familiar with on every character, so there was kind of an additional learning curve there when I decided to do something with Hunter. When I have used this, though, it works really well. It doesn't stack as well as you would like with multi-shot and trick shot and all of that. It does help, though. It does give you a nice damage increase. I was in a lot of groups with another hunter, and we would kind of go back and forth on mob pulls and boss fights and things like that. So This was one of the reasons why. So unless you have a specific reason to take something else, I would say if you wanted more of an AoE focus, explosive shot. If not, careful aim. And then if you just want to be annoying, take barrage. Um, so I took, this is where it gets to be less optimal. I took camouflage just because I like having camouflage. It comes in handy. Natural mending would probably be better. I have thought of swapping this off. I just really like having camouflage. I remember when camouflage was higher up in the talent tree, so you kind of had to really level up. It was like one of the last abilities you got. Um, it might seem weird that a hunter would have camouflage. It actually comes in more useful than you would think. Um, Especially for gaining stealth for 1 minute on a 1 minute cooldown. And it heals you, so there you go. Trailblazer, yeah, any of the abilities where you have to go with not being attacked are only useful about half the time when you think about it. I know I've taken natural mending before. It works perfectly fine. I'm not sure. I did kind of look at this. I really don't have to use my self-heal very often. So usually, of course, as I said, I was doing dungeons. So usually there was a healer who was pretty good. Normal dungeons, as you're leveling, aren't overly complicated. I did die a few times here and there. Most of where I had trouble was doing the kind of world quest for trinkets and things like that. Just either overpulling or just mobs respawned and you kind of got overwhelmed or things like that. So
I don't have a target.
um, camouflage, I think I get more use of here, and I just like having it. It's just a useful utility to have. And since Hunter is a class that's um, a combination of, yes, it's a DPS class, but it also has some utility to it. I like to lean a little more to the utility side since that's something I don't always have on a lot of other characters I play. Going to skip a row and come down to Born to be Wild. Reduces the cooldown of aspect of Cheetah and Turtle. So Cheetah gives you a speed increase, and Turtle gives you a damage mitigation. So it reduces damage taken, but you can't attack. This was so much better when it helped heal you. I need to look in to see if there's a glyph or something for that. I know in don't remember if it was BFA, if they took that away, or I want to say I had it glyphed, or I had a legendary or something that made Aspect of the Turtle heal. There was some additional thing you could do where it would heal you as well. Still not bad for reflecting damage, especially if you're trying to get away from a mob or something like that. You use Aspect of the Turtle, you use your self-heal. Works pretty good in combination. Post-haste doesn't really benefit me much. Binding shackles, I don't really use blinding shot that often, really at all, which may entirely be my flaw as a hunter. I tend to use bursting shot or concussive shot more, or in some cases even tar trap, or frozen trap. I pretty much use everything else, or freezing trap, excuse me. I pretty much use everything else. I just don't use blinding shot. I just never really cared for how it worked. It's just on the fence of being one of those coordination things that I'm just not good at. Um, and then they gave it to us. I think it used to be a talent, if I remember correctly, and then they gave it to us as a baseline ability an expansion or two ago. Um, so, Born to Be Wild definitely has the biggest effect of the three. Lethal shots, arcane shot, and multi shot have a 30% chance to reduce the cooldown of rapid fire by 0.5 seconds, which is pretty good. Kill shot has 2 charges and causes aim shot to recharge 60% faster for 3 seconds. So what I'm finding is anything that interacts with aim shot um, has not been great. I don't really use kill shot enough to justify having 2 charges. Um, Aim shot recharges fast enough. I've seen some other hunters take double tap. A lot of hunters that I was in dungeons with were beast mastery. So I didn't have a lot of chances to see what other talents hunters were using. Um, the few that were marksmanship as well, I know at least one had double tap. Your next aim shot will fire a second time instantly at 100% power without consuming focus, and your next rapid fire will shoot 100% additional shots during its channel, which is not bad. Um, Again, it's kind of a coordination thing. Rapid fire doesn't do great with generating focus. You kind of need to use a few steady shots in there depending on the fight. Um, Even still, keeping this off cooldown just for trick shots and different things like that, I think is worth it. I may try double tap. I'm not 100% sure on some of these. I just tried to figure out a kind of a functioning build, as it were, um, as I was leveling and my gear was changing and things like that. I was trying to figure out what was the ability and what was my gear, and um, trying to make sure things were working like they were supposed to, and different things like that. So a lot of the dungeons I ran were, as I said, kind of a testing ground for just kind of seeing how everything worked and kind of getting back in the um, back used to the rotation of hunter, I guess um, would be the best way to put it. And then the last tier, before we go back up and talk about this one in the middle here, lock and load was what I had. Your ranged attacks have an 8% chance to trigger lock and load. Now, 8% seems really low. You range auto attack quite often, especially in a dungeon. So I actually get this to trigger fairly frequently. Aimed shot is, let me see, yeah, it's the, I was gonna say, yeah, it's the hardest hitting ability that marksmanship has. It's kind of their signature ability. So if you can use it without having to use the almost 2.5 second cast time, or again with trick shot, works really well with that, especially if you don't have the focus cost. I keep coming back to this. I originally, when I switched over to um, explosive shot, I also took volley because it said I was having trouble using trick shot while it was up because it has a very short. It's up for I think like 15 seconds or so, and for whatever reason, 15 seconds is more than enough time. For whatever reason, I kept missing it. So I had taken volley thinking that, okay, you do more damage with volley and you do more damage with trick shot, so it kind of stacks up, and um, that's where your AOE comes from. And volley works well enough. Um, However, I it is a target. I believe it's a target on location ability. So there was that. There was also the fact that I kind of had enough abilities already. Kind of didn't want to take another ability. I'm thinking there's a way to still work volley in here somewhere. I'm just not sure. I also tried calling the shots. Casting Arcane Shot or Multi-Shot reduces the cooldown of True Shot by 2.5 seconds. Now, True Shot they changed from what I remember, because it used to give you a haste increase, and it doesn't anymore. Um, and this is where kind of focusing more on the rotation comes in. It reduces cooldown of aim shot and rapid fire by 60 seconds and causes aim shot to cast 50% faster for 15 seconds. While True Shot is active, you generate 50% additional focus. Your focus is still an issue. So disregard that. That is not necessarily an advantage. The cooldown and cast time is the important part. This is what you use on boss fights. So calling the shots did not last very long. So I went back to lock and load. Again, not 100% sure on some of these. I'm still thinking if there's a way to work volley in here. I think this is one of the last things that I'll kind of need to figure out. An AOE ability, a target on low, target at location ability is not doesn't work in great with how hunters work. It worked fine. As I said, works perfectly fine for what it does, especially with the trick shot effect built in. I just kind of had enough abilities already, and I wasn't using everything, so I said, well, I don't want to add another ability if I'm not already, in one situation or another using everything I have. And that, along with the fact that I was trying to see what ability was doing what. And if you get too many new abilities as you're switching things around, you can't really tell what's doing what. At least I can't. I would prefer to use maybe one or two things, play around with those so I could see, and then if I make a change, go, oh yeah, this, why isn't this working like this, or why did this change, or something like that. So lock and load works perfectly fine for what it does for right now. If I needed to change to something else, it would probably be to take volley, and maybe change something else around. If I could change explosive shot to something else, I would be more inclined to take volley, because this space would be free. I have seen other hunters take volley. So I definitely think it definitely does worthwhile damage. Physical damage is about the best damage you can do in game. And then the last tier, this is the one I played around with the most. So I have steady focus now. This is what I had when I started leveling. So I had about 8% haste. This would get my haste up to about 15%. I wasn't using steady shot when I started out leveling. I was trying to rely on rapid fire. So I said, well, I'll just switch this because it's a talent I'm not using. So I took Chimera Shot, which works really well. it has a cleave effect. It does a massive amount of nature damage, and then does about half of the nature damage amount as frost damage to a second target. Um, However, once I figured out more how trick shots worked, I found I wasn't using Chimera Shot as much. So there was really no um, there was really no point in having it. It costs as much as Arcane Shot. It does more damage than Arcane Shot. Um, However, with as low as my haste is right now, which is 3%, which is extremely low for just about any character, I decided just to switch back. So I tried Steady Shot or Steady Focus. Then I went back to Chimera Shot. Then I went back to Steady Focus. I tried Streamline. Rapid fire damage is increased by 15%, which is pretty good overall for a passive ability, increasing a ability you already have. And rapid fire also causes your next aim shot to cast 30% faster. So the 30% faster part, I was kind of interested in. That just is not worth taking this for. If you want to increase rapid fire's damage, that would be worth taking this for. It works pretty good, so it's about 3,300. With this, it jumps up to almost 4,000, so you can see it's a pretty significant increase. If rapid fire somehow generated focus based on a percentage of damage, or if Streamline increased the channel time or something, as some of the Mistweaver abilities do, or at least one of the Mistweaver talents does, I know, increases the channel time and the healing of Essence Font. This would be a lot better. I was disappointed at how this worked. Again, it might have been where my haste was at the time. It wasn't much lower than 8%. It was a little percentage or two lower, but it wasn't much lower. And I couldn't hardly even tell the difference with the 30% cast time. So, just went back to Steady Focus for right now. That works perfectly fine. You only really have to use Steady Focus maybe 2-3 times to generate enough focus to go back to using your other abilities. So, and the haste increase lasts for 15 seconds. So it's a worthwhile benefit for whatever you do. Whatever you do next, whether you're trying to do AoE for mobs, or if you're trying to do more single target for a boss fight, the haste will help you either way. So, yeah. So there you go, folks. I also did not use a pet for most of the dungeons. I did here and there. I did on a world quest at different times. For the most part, though, I did not for Lone Wolf, which increases your damage by 10% when you have no pet active. So there you go. I just always liked this when it came out. This came out, or I at least remember it around Legion. May have been in the game before that. I just really only remember it from Legion. I remember first noticing it in the Hunter class hall when I was out trying to figure something out on a training dummy, I think, or I might have even been at the Stable Master. It was somewhere outside. So yeah, that's probably also worth mentioning as far as DPS. So if you had a pet that you just really liked, or was just really good for whatever reason, I don't know that it would be a disadvantage to use a pet. I just didn't. Um, so, yeah. So as for your rotation, there's basically two different ones, as I mentioned. There is your AoE, which you'll basically just spam multi-shot. I don't think there's actually 3 targets around here to get this to work right. You'll use multi-shot, and then I'll use rapid fire, which you see there. It triggered Master Marksman. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. And then if you just run low on focus, use steady shot a few times, get your haste buff. For a boss fight, true shot, and then you're just focusing on aim shot, rapid fire, aim shot. You'll usually get a proc of something else you can use as kind of a filler. And this is where a lot of your damage will come from. Aim shot's not a terribly slow ability. It's not as bad as, say, a pyroblast. So you've got 1, 2, 3. There you go. Damage from, let's see, there we got lock and load. Damage from Master Marksman doesn't seem to stack all that well. Let me see just to make sure. So I'm pretty sure aim shot applies it. No? No, it doesn't. Okay. Whoa. No? There we go. Arcane shot does, so about 170, which is about normal for what I've seen. I really thought aim shot applied it. Maybe not. No, arcane shot doesn't apply it. Oh no, there we go. Wonder if that's a glitch. Oh no, there we go. Because your range special attack, critical strikes cause... Oh. Yeah. Not entirely sure. Because most of the time when I've used this, the only one that actually applied it was aim shot. So I don't know if that just critical... Let me see something here. I don't know if that just critted more. Precise shots. Aim shot causes your next 2 arcane or multi shots to deal. Okay, so it's not critical striking from that. Yeah, see, it's one of those talents that doesn't quite do what it says it does. Or it's very misleading how it's written. Your range special attacks. Well, arcane shot's not what I would call a special attack. Critical strikes cause the target to bleed for, yeah. Interesting. Although this is on a training dummy, so which increases its level with me. So I was a much lower level when I tried this, so I may have had higher critical strike than what for that particular level. Yeah, 137 over for damage every 2 seconds. I mean, it's not a huge amount. Bleeds. I typically like dots or bleeds for targets. It's just a nice little bit of extra damage. And think that was everything. We went over the spell book, went over the talents, a little bit of the rotation. So again, AoE is just basically me spamming multi-shot until I get trick shots, and then using rapid fire. Now, trick shots does go away after you take advantage of it one time. However, it can be triggered again immediately, so there is no internal cooldown from what I can tell. So you can use rapid fire while rapid fire is on cooldown if you get a proc for arcane of lock and load for arcane shot or aim shot. You can use that. You can use explosive shot. Use any of these in any combination while they're on cooldown. So you should always be able to do AoE damage, which is why I liked having kind of these three in this kind of this setup. Because you always have a way to do some sort of AoE damage. It drives me nuts on classes or specs rather that are more single target focused, having to switch from target to target to target. So yeah, and then for boss fights, as I said, true shot. I'll just basically spam aim shot and rapid fire back and forth. Might use explosive shot if the boss has ads. And then use kind of either arcane or multi-shot, again, depending on the boss fight, as just kind of a filler. And then just kind of keep running through that. Use steady shot when needed. And yeah, not too bad, actually. So yeah, so there you go, folks. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope that was helpful for you, and thank you for watching.